Okay, so this is going to be a bit of a different video than what I typically do, because instead of reviewing a specific work of media, I'm instead going to be describing all the different versions of a specific work of media that exist out there. So as the title indicates, I'm obviously going to be talking about Ben-Hur, but what a majority of people out there don't know is that this is not the original work of Ben-Hur. Heck, it's not even the original film adaptation of Ben-Hur. The original film adaptation was made 50 years before that, and even that wasn't the original version of Ben-Hur. The original version of Ben-Hur was actually a novel made in 1880 by Lewis Wallace called Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ. Which is actually in the public domain right now, so you can actually find PDFs to download of this book for free without too much difficulty, or you can do what I did and purchase it off the Kindle app for 50 cents. I think that if you buy a regular book version of it, you'd have to pay about $10 for it, and then you have to pay more for that if you want to get an audiobook version of it, but there you go, what? But, obviously, as this book was made in 1880, the writing style is undoubtedly different than writers that make books these days. And from what little I've read of it on the Kindle app, that does seem to be true, but from what I've heard, all later translations of the book, or an updated version that was made by the author's great-great-granddaughter, they all seem to kind of change the flow of the story or a little bit of the structure. Nothing really went into specifics, but when I was listening to an audio sample of the original version versus the one that his great-great-granddaughter did, I could tell that it was totally different, especially since it seemed that the original version was made in third person, but what little I heard of the redone version, it seemed to be done in first person, though maybe I was just listening to a long speech, I don't know, but I definitely think going with the original author's version is the way to go, even though I wouldn't totally blame you if you decided to check out the newer version, because that's easier to understand language, and you gotta remember, it is a descendant of the original author, so this version had to have been approved, unlike it seems like a couple of other books that seem to be sequels to the original book, because I tried to do some research on those, and I came up with, like, nothing, other than the fact that they exist. That was kind of odd. So that takes care of Ben-Hur in the world of print. Now for the world of film and television, with one exception that I'll get to later. So the original film adaptation of Ben-Hur was a one-reel 13 to 15 minute silent adaptation that was made in 1907. Why did I say 13 to 15 minutes? Well, that's because there's multiple different versions of the movie that you can find online, and they all seem to have slightly different run times. I personally downloaded a 15-minute version, which I'll put in the description, even though it's in the description for my latest DVD and Blu-ray update series of videos. But I don't know why that there are different lengths. It just seems to be something that is the case for this work. But given how it seems like that this movie never got any sort of official release, which I don't totally blame anybody for because of the troubled history with this movie, I guess that's a valid explanation for it. Now, why did this movie never get a true official release? Simple. When the filmmakers were making this adaptation, even though it was kind of common for I think filmmakers to do this, they didn't ask permission from the original author's family. So, their work by our standards was illegal. So what happened was that the author's son actually took the filmmakers to court, and then the case went all the way to the US Supreme Court, which was decided in favor of the author's son, and that actually started the copyright laws that we learned today. So it's quite interesting that an adaptation of this story is indirectly responsible for the copyright laws that we have today. That was a really interesting fact for me to learn when I was researching what adaptations of these movies exist, though I am glad that we can still watch it. I don't think it's going to be that great of an adaptation because it is trying to tell the entire story of Ben-Hur in 13 to 15 minutes, but as I've also come to learn, that does seem to be common for works of media that were made at the time, and the film business, if you could even call it a business back then, was just starting, so gotta lower your expectations. You can, however, get a DVD of this movie that isn't a bootleg, but you actually have to buy the DVD that exists for the 1913 Spartacus adaptation, and that DVD seems kind of hard to get, and even then, the main thing about that DVD is Spartacus. Ben-Hur is more of a bonus feature, so there you go for that. Now, the next adaptation of Ben-Hur was a 1925 full-length silent film that had full permission from the author's son to make, and it seems to be quite popular. Even among the people that enjoyed the 1950s adaptation, there's even quite a bunch of people that say that this 25 adaptation is truer to the novel than the 50s. That's going to be really interesting for me to see when I get there. But when it comes to owning this movie, it seems like it's kind of tough to get, because I don't know if this movie is in the public domain or not, but if it's not, it's really close to being in the public domain. And it does seem like that there was a official DVD release of this movie that was made a while back, but I couldn't find any copies of it. Now, if you were to type Ben-Hur 1925 into Amazon, you would see that there's a DVD that you can get for like $16. But if you look at the reviews for that product, which I did, you'll come to realize that it's an import, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But if you read the further complaints that they have, such as there being a watermark in one corner of the video that seems to fade in and out over the course of the entire movie, that's a huge turn off. You would definitely not want that if you're going to be wanting to get a movie. So if you want to get this movie, you actually are going to have to buy a more deluxe version of the 1950s movie, which is the version that people are most familiar with. And a fun bit of trivia that I didn't know until today, the director of this movie, William Wyler, not only did he direct this, he was a primary director and creator of the chariot sequence that was in the 1925 version. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? So I don't really need to go into the history of this movie because I think most people would be familiar with it or just know that this movie exists, but this is the version of Ben-Hur that has the most complicated history when it comes to owning it, even though it's not as complicated as I've just made it sound, because you really only have 4 choices, and you have 2 choices that are unique to each format, DVD and Blu-ray, and they're basically the same, because you have to choose between either getting a bare-bones 2-disc version that has the movie, or you can get a more deluxe version that has all kinds of extras. As an extras guy, I got the deluxe version of this movie, and if you look at the back here, You can also watch the 1925 version on its own separate disc. Well, that's worth it, especially since this DVD actually isn't that expensive. You can find it quite easily. But if you've watched all of my videos, you're going to be like, but wait a minute, I thought you had Ben-Hur on Blu-ray. I do. Look. I actually had this before I got that DVD. Because I was an extras guy and I heard that this movie was coming out on Blu-ray thanks to Zara Nizarak, and that there were some neat goodies in this set. Both in terms of special features for the movie and in terms of other little things that are included specifically in this 50th anniversary set. And if you watch his video, which I'll also put in the description, I think that it'll really entice you to go out and buy it if you could find the Blu-ray set at a decent price. This set's been out of print for years. Now, there is a 5-disc DVD version of this set, but as someone who already had this set on Blu-ray, I didn't want to buy all the non-disc stuff again. And then when I was comparing the extras that are on this set and the DVD set to this 4-disc DVD, it turns out there's only one feature that is on the free disc Blu-ray set, because there's only 3 discs, 2 discs for the 50s movie, 1 disc for the 25 movie, and all the other stuff. The only thing that this set doesn't have that this has is a new documentary that is about Charlton Heston. I think it's about remembering him and his life, that kind of a thing. Because I haven't watched any of these Ben-Hur adaptations, I just knew that I wanted to watch and review all of them for you eventually. And also, that documentary, it doesn't seem like it's available to be pirated anywhere, so at some point I'll try and buy it off Amazon, because I'm pretty sure that you can buy it from there, and then I'll just record my computer, which is what I've done for a few things that you can't pirate out there. Annoying, but I'll do it. So now that we're 12 minutes in, that takes care of all of the tricky Ben-Hur subjects when it comes to home video releases. Everything else is actually quite easy for me to talk about. There's only one version of all these products that are out there. Well, technically 2 for the last one, but I'll get to that. Now, the next version of Ben-Hur that is worth really looking into is actually a radio drama that was made by the BBC in 1995. And originally, I was having a tough time trying to track down this version, but I decided to try again today, and I was able to find the whole thing on archive.org. So, look down below and you can listen to the whole thing there if you feel like. And interestingly, the guy that voices Ben-Hur in here, Jamie Glover or Glover, I always screw up with that name if there's an L or if there's not, especially since you have Danny Glover, the actor in America. The guy that voices Ben-Hur in that radio drama is the son of the actor that plays the Admiral that Darth Vader chokes at the beginning of Empire Strikes Back. That's interesting, huh? And I would think that because it's a 4-hour epic, that would definitely be more true to the novel here than anything else. We'll see when I get there, because I'm going to be watching all these things in order. Then the next version was a 2003 animated adaptation that you can actually find on here, done by who other than Charlton Heston. And not only did he and his production company create this movie, he returns to voice the character again. And apparently there's also an introduction where he explains a little bit of the genesis for this movie, and that's going to be kind of interesting. to see him do the character in 2 different situations, although obviously this is going to be a lot quicker because this is only 80 minutes and that was about 3.5 hours. So we'll see what they're able to do there. The next adaptation was a 2008, I believe, mini-series that was made for television. Although the killer is, even though this is in 2 parts, it's still shorter than the 1950s adaptation. This is only 190 minutes, and I would bet that at least 5 of those minutes are the credits and stuff like that. So, even after all that, this is still the longest film adaptation out there. Nice. But I'm looking forward to checking this out, because from what I can tell on the back, this does seem to have some good production values, and it'll be kind of interesting to see Lana Lang from Smallville in her supporting role. I'm not an oh my god gushing person for that actress, but that is an attractive reason to get it if you're familiar with her. Then, also in like 2008, 2009, Ben-Hur was adapted for another cartoon, which I think is one episode of a series of animated features that was done by a Christian company, and this series was titled either Heroes of the Faith or the Saints and Heroes Collection. I really cannot figure out what is the proper title for this overall collection. But some of those things that they made were released individually, including this one. But, like with the 1907 movie, they seem to be trying to cram pretty much the entire story into one really short cartoon. But you can view this cartoon on here if you feel like it. I just decided to get the DVD because I'm getting the DVDs for everything else, and it is available separately. Why not? Now, this next adaptation is something that probably is something that barely anyone has ever heard of or would be interested in. And even after I show it to you, that's probably still going to be the case once you learn who made this adaptation. You've got the Asylum's version of Ben-Hur, in the name of Ben-Hur, but according to what a couple of reviews on Amazon indicate, Ben-Hur doesn't really seem to show up in this movie. And we'll see about that. That's really all I can say about it. And then finally, you've got the 2016 adaptation, which doesn't really need to be going into discussion because most people definitely heard of this. But why do I have the Blu-ray? Because unlike the rest of the other things, the DVD doesn't have the extras, and I'm an extras guy. Yeah, I bet you didn't know there was that much Ben-Hur out there, did you? Well, I hope I really sharpened those minds up. See ya!